LS can be a controversial figure in the League of Legends, but whether you love LS or hate him, you have to give it to him that he is one of the most innovative minds in League of Legends, and nowhere was this exemplified more than with his short time with Cloud9 this season, where he brought such comps to professional like Ivern Mid. But we're not talking about Ivern Mid today, we're talking about something potentially even zanier than that, and that is his Nasus Support. At first glance, Nasus Support may sound troll, but it's already caught on so much that a Superliga team by the name of Bison's Esports even picked it up with a fasting Senna in the playoffs of their league, and other pro teams in separate regions have at least started hovering the pick as an option when it slots in well. Even though LS himself says,
I firmly believe that Nasus is an awful solo queue pick. I think this is actually very akin to champions that are very strong and competitive historically, but are absolutely terrible inside of solo queue.
He has had some solid success with the pick so far while climbing the ranks, and we're going to analyze how, when, and why you may want to bring Nasus Support into your champion pool. So far, LS has managed to play Nasus Support over 40 games in Korean solo queue with a 54% win rate, where he's currently ranked at Diamond 2, and he continues to climb higher and higher to this day. Even though all dogs go to heaven, Nasus Support has a hell of a lot of weaknesses, so we have to talk about those first. For one, Nasus Support, unless paired with a fasting Senna, will not be able to farm minions, meaning no stacks for his Q. He's not a traditional support, so Nasus has no easy way of healing or shielding his AD carries or team. Additionally, Nasus is typically a top laner, as you know, which means he's pretty reliant on income, which he won't be getting much of in the support role. And finally, and most importantly, he was created back in 2009, which means he probably just isn't that good overall. But even with all these potential problems, LS has found a way to make it work. Early game, LS is always first placing a ward for his team either offensively or defensively to prevent from invades, and then heads back to base before minions spawn to grab a sweeper. Support Nasus is super susceptible to being poked down, so being able to clear wards and brush can help you find more areas for refuge. Once in lane at level 1, LS grabs his E or Spirit Fire. This is the first of two big reasons why Nasus Support works. This early in the game, Spirit Fire is really just being used as a poke tool. In tandem with his keystone Comet, its base damage is relatively high for an AoE ability, and as such, whenever hitting it, you should be aiming to hit both your opponents in lane. But LS is methodical in his approach when using Spirit Fire in laning phase, only using it when both Comet and Mana Flow ban runes are active to get the most bang for his buck. If you were to spam this ability on cooldown, you would be out of mana before you know it. Beyond being a simple poking tool, the reason this ability is so important to Nasus being viable is because of the armor shred it applies. At max level, Spirit Fire reduces enemies' armor by 45%, nearly half of their armor rendered worthless from this ability in a huge AoE. It's because of this ability that you don't want to pick Nasus Support into just any team. You want to pick him when your team has some significant AD threats in multiple roles. That's not to say if you're playing flex queue, you should tell your team to pick all AD champs since you are Nasus Support. But if in solo queue you have, let's say, a Yone mid, a Xin Zhao jungler, a Draven as ADC, and just one AP champ of Mordekaiser in top lane, it's definitely a good pick then. And also, picking Nasus with a team that works is important, but it's also important to pick him with an ADC that can capitalize on this armor shred. Marksmen or attack damage carries that can do that are those who build lethality or who are uber aggressive in lane like Varus, Draven, or even Sivir. With this armor shred, tank supports or even something like a Ramish jungle can look a lot less menacing than they normally do for your ADC. And if they are one of those lethality ADCs, that means they can probably burst them down pretty easy. Back to lane at level 2, LS takes Nasus's W or Wither. This is the other huge reason of why Nasus Support can be a terror. A point and click slow that increases in efficacy over its 5-second duration is already nuts on its own. I mean, we've already seen how crazy a point and click slow can be when we covered Zillion Support, and it can largely be used as the same things that Zillion Support uses it for, like allowing for easy chase downs for your team, or ruining a movement speed based champion like Rammus or Hecarim. But Wither is more than just a movement speed slow because it packs a cripple or attack speed slow as well. So Nasus is not only good with AD champions, but he's also a strong counter to a lot of them also. He's especially strong against ADCs who are super reliant on movement speed and attack speed like Kalista, who is the champion LS first crafted Nasus Support to counter. Vayne, and the recently released Zeri. Wither can make champions that rely on their attack speed or movement speed pretty much worthless, and the more disgusting thing about it is that with some levels and ability haste, you have to wait only a second or two once one cast finishes to then cast it again, making it near impossible for anyone without a dash in their kit to get away. Going back to lane at level 2, you may think that Nasus has low kill pressure with just these two abilities, but you'd be wrong. If you're paired with a favorable ADC like we just talked about earlier, and your lane is overextended, you can find picks thanks to Wither's long duration time if an enemy mispositions or is overextended. But which of these two abilities does LS max first? Well, it depends. The majority of the time, he's maxing E if his lane is going even or against most ADCs. But if he starts winning lane heavily and enemies start to play out of the range of his E, or if he's against one of those ADCs we mentioned that Wither counters heavily, then he'll instead start maxing his W. Whichever ability he doesn't end up maxing first, he'll max second. But BCawk, what about Nasus's Q or Siphon Strike, I hear you ask? Well, here's the most surprising part of the build. He doesn't level up his Q at all. Well, until he has to. You're not going to be farming, and the cooldown for Q is so long at level 1, LS says it's not worth it in comparison to getting additional levels in your two other basic abilities. It does make sense, but to insert my 2 cents here, I don't think there would be much harm in you putting 1 point in Q at level 3 for when you inevitably find yourself farming a minion or two, needing a bit of extra damage in a fight, or want an auto attack reset when clearing wards, but that's just my opinion. Inevitably, if you don't decide to level up Q, you're gonna have a lot of downtime in lane, and that doesn't mean that you should just be sitting back and waiting for those cooldowns to start doing things again. Nasus's passive gives him lifesteal, so when you are waiting for these ability cooldowns, or if the enemies are playing very far back, you still should be auto-attacking minions with no intention to take the farm, but just so you can get some of that lifesteal back and sustain harder in lane. Rounding out the early game, LS pretty much stays exclusively in lane, but with the lane priority Spiritfire is able to achieve for him, he does find himself roaming around sometimes to help push other lanes' leads, or just to help with an invade. And finally, at level 6, he takes his ultimate, or Fury of the Sands. To keep it short, this is like a panic button for Nasus support. Early game, you're not that tanky at all, so baiting people into attacking you with this extra health and 40 extra armor and magic resist that it gives you at level 1 can be super effective. It makes LS nearly unkillable throughout the game, and this paired alongside Wither makes punishing enemies that overextend super simple. The difficulty to kill Nasus support only ups as the game goes on, as he uses Futures Market to hit his tank item power spikes earlier. Against auto-attack heavy enemies, he builds Frozen Heart first to even more heavily cripple their attack speed and to help with some mana issues. Against other comps that aren't very auto-attack focused, he'll instead build a Fibblewinter to first again become more tanky and to help with some mana issues as well. Building up all of this tankiness is necessary on Nasus support if you want to stay relevant throughout the game and actually participate in mid-game and team fights. By mid-game, this is your strongest point as Nasus support, and LS wants to stay with the champions that pair well with him to get the most effectiveness out of his kit. There's not much use buddying up with that Mordekaiser in top lane when your kit helps your Yone in mid much more. By sticking with those champions that work well with Nasus's kit and baiting enemies in with your tankiness, you can easily push ahead your solo lanes or jungler or ADC even further. Once team fights start, you're really trying to get into the middle of them. This is not only to make sure that you can wither your most valuable target, but so that your ultimate can do its most damage. Unlike earlier in the game where you want to use the ultimate like a panic button to survive, in team fights you want to activate it as soon as possible and then position yourself close to multiple enemies so you can do up to 5% of those enemies' max health per second. As a bonus to this, walking into the middle of the enemy team helps you achieve your final team fighting goal of soaking up the most damage. Turns out, even if you're a big Nasus support, people still think that you're going to go down easily, so the more people you can distract and push onto you, the more time you can buy for the rest of your team to finish the fight. For his build, he starts every game with a Spell Thief's Edge. From there, he'll buy his first core item, either getting a Frozen Heart against auto-attack heavy teams or a Winter's Approach against any other. By then, he'll typically have the magical footwear from his runes and either upgrade to Boots of Lucidity, Plated Steel Caps, or Swifties. After that, he'll buy his actual mythic item, a Locket of Iron Solari. Next, he'll look to the enemy team for his next items, buying items like Anathema's Change to abuse one key target, Redemption for heavy team fighting, or maybe a Thornmail against healing heavy teams. If the game goes long or he needs some more oomph in his build, he'll buy an Elixir of Iron, and throughout the game, like a good support does, he's buying control wards and maybe a ward stone if the game goes very late. For his runes, he takes Comet for more damage, Mana Flow Band for more sustain, Transcendence for the ability haste, and Scorch for better poke in lane. He also brings Magical Footwear to save some cash, and Futures Market to hit item power spikes earlier. For his flex runes, he takes 2 Adaptive Force and Armor or Magic Resist depending on his lane opponents. Nasus Support works well with aggressive ADCs like Draven or Tristana, or ADCs who build lethality like Sivir or Varus. Nasus Support struggles against strong Enchanter supports like Soraka or Nami, or long-range poke supports like Xerath or Vel'Koz. Thanks guys for checking out this video. If you did enjoy this, I ask you a favor to check out the description below for links to our Discord, Twitch, or Twitter. And if you're looking for more support guides, I heavily suggest you check out our last one, which was on Alistar Top. See you guys next time. Peace.